Welcome to the Unlock 360 podcast, where education leaders share how they're turning vision into action, one system, one school, and one student at a time, because strong systems give every learner a better shot at success. Welcome back to another exciting episode highlighting educational leaders on Season 4 of Unlock 360. I am your host, Wendy York Davoud, and today's guest of honor is Dr. Michael Houston, who is serving as Deputy Superintendent of Instructional and Administrative Support for Channelview ISD in Texas. Channelview ISD serves approximately 9,500 students. Welcome, Dr. Houston.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. And let me just start with congratulations is in order for recently receiving your doctorate. And big accomplishment while also serving a medium to large size school district in the state of Texas.
Thank you.
Will you shed some light for those tuning in on your journey in education? What led you to becoming the deputy superintendent?
Well, for me, it starts early on. Growing up in Alabama and finishing high school and going to Tuskegee, I really had a passion for mathematics. At the time, not really thinking education, but for mathematics. And so I really enjoyed my opportunities to kind of get deeper into math and tutor fellow classmates, those kind of things there. And so moving to Texas after getting my math degree, I really got into managing properties and apartments and realized that managing adults was not as much fun as managing kids could be possibly. And so I started teaching in Clear Creek ISD in 2006. And in that time frame, was teaching math, of course. And really just, I think the way you go from being a teacher to administrator is about impact. And so I was having a very large impact in the classroom, work with students, and I was coaching track and field. And I enjoyed what I was doing so much and had the opportunity to be a department chair, to lead a department of actives. And that really led me to say, you know what, I want a bigger impact and lead a campus. And so I was a AP for 1 year.
May I ask you a question first about your experience as a department chair before you pick back up with your AP experience? So as a department chair, were you at the middle school, junior high school level?
The high school level.
Okay. And high school math teams are, I've worked with many, and they can be very fun. What was what was your team like? Was it a challenge? Was it easy breezy? Somewhere in the middle?
It was somewhere in the middle, probably, because I came into a team that had, I was at a large campus and was asked to go to be a department chair on a new campus, a small campus. And so
Okay.
it was a small campus so I only had a department at the time of 6 people, myself and 5 others. And I really had 2, really 3 that were on the end of being very, very young new teachers. One was a brand new teacher, straight out of college. One had been teaching a little while. One had 3 years. And then I had 2 that were much more seasoned veteran teachers. And so coming in and having like the mother type teacher who was really nurturing and supporting and trying to guide all of us, and then having the brand new teacher who didn't know what they were doing at all. It was a blast for me because I got to be a department chair and an instructional coach at the same time. And so to do those 2 things for me were a blast. And my first year as department chair, we moved our campus to have a 100% time tax. And so we were doing tax, and we had 100% of our AC level students pass tax. 100% of our sophomore students pass tax. And so it was like, man, we're doing some good things here for our kids. And so that's kind of how I got my start in seeing how that needle can move for students. We really have a strategic approach to ensuring that every kid gets what they need. So that's my start.
So suddenly you are in some ways managing, leading, and coaching adults now once again.
Yes.
And then you step into the assistant principalship. Go on.
And that was a whole new world because I had no clue what all it took to be an AP on a high school campus. 6A high school. At the time we had about 3,000 kids. And it was a lot. It was a whole lot. And I was on campus where in that 1 year, my first year there, we experienced every legal issue, every emergency issues you could think of, from lockdowns to all the things that happen on the campus. And the very next year, I went back to my old campus as principal. And so while I was department chair, I was returning a year later now as a principal of the campus after only one year's at AP. So I really, in my opinion, had a lot to learn still. And I'm
Yeah.
thankful for the opportunity to be a principal so early, but I had a lot to learn. And so I spent probably my first 3 years in principal seat learning about being a principal. And
Mhm.
but we had lots of growth, lots of achievement. And so later on became principal of the largest high school in CCISD, Clear Creek ISD at the time, Clear Springs. And there, I was there 4 years, and that was a blast because by that time I was a more seasoned vet principal. And so I got to do a lot of great things, a lot of great students, great staff, great community. And so that's what led me to come into Channelview ISD back in 2022 as the time the assistant superintendent for school leadership. And so my role at
Mhm.
the time was tied to working with principals and campuses and help grow principals and grow their capacity and looking at kind of the campus operations piece. And so I did that for 2 years. And then back in 2024, in the fall, I was then promoted to be the deputy superintendent, where then I was doing the same job with the principal. So I kept principals and campuses, but also add in all the instructional teams as well. So then became working with EB students and emerging bilingual, multilingual, working with our advanced academics, and all the curriculum areas tied to that. And so that was my first time really say my focus was instruction for entire district. So um, that was my first shot at it, and it was fun too.
That's fantastic. You've held many, many different roles, and it's also interesting, and I appreciate talking to someone else like who like myself, um, started our career in a different direction. I actually started in the business world too, and then realized, you know what, this isn't really fulfilling me. I'm gonna have to go back and I'm gonna have to be a teacher. So yeah, it's a great journey that you've had. You've got this infectious energy, and on my end, I'm just feeling some passion and some joy. And I'm just curious about, like, what do you love most about your role as deputy superintendent?
Oh man, I go back to that word impact. It is by far the opportunity to impact so many different areas is my role now. It is absolutely an amazing feeling knowing that if it comes down to teacher growth on a campus, working with a principal, how to coach a teacher. It comes down to looking at curriculum choices and instructional frameworks for our entire district. It comes down to even
Mhm.
our PEAMS data and accountability data. Knowing that I can have a part to play in how that impacts our district and what we look at like as a district and how those things impact our achievement as a district. I love that. I love having impact. So that's been probably the thing that drives me from being a teacher in a classroom to being where I am now has been having a larger impact.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. And kind of stepping away a little bit from that and thinking about your district's North Star or your district's priorities, will you share with our listeners what those are at the moment? Like, what are your top priorities as a district?
Um, our number one priority is creating a environment where all students are empowered to thrive. That's our number one priority. Is that we want to make sure that our students are able to thrive, and not just thrive in the years to come, but also thrive right now where they are and thrive in our community. We want our students to be able to come in and to one day be able to work and play right here in Channelview. And so that's a big focus for us. To do that, we know we've got to have strong systems. And so instructionally, we're focused on having great tier one instruction, which means that we want our students to go in classrooms and every single day feel like, hey, I'm learning. We want them to have opportunities. And so whether it be elementary opportunities for students or things like CTE for our secondary students, we want all of our students to have the highest of opportunities that we can provide so that we can say we provide our students a world-class education. Um, and again, I think it starts with having really clear North Star points like curriculum instruction, assessment pieces that are right, the right staff in the room with teachers, I mean, with students. A lot of those things are not necessarily things that are, I guess, typically we put on posters.
Mhm.
But the reality is that it starts with little things like hiring the right people. That is a North Star for our district is that, hey, do we have the right people in the right positions? Are we training those people up so that we have the capacity to reach the students and to do their work? Um, and the other part that has been a big thing just recently for us is having a real clear sense of what do we value as a district. And it's not just an area of just instructional things, but also whether it be operations side of things, technology side of things. Do we all
Yeah,
have a very clear idea of the values of our district? So
that's good. Would you say that, you mentioned how sometimes these things become posters or, they're more like forward facing for the community or for sometimes even compliance reasons. But would you say that one or more of these practices or priorities is really impacting classroom instruction?
absolutely. I didn't mention literacy because, we always for literacy, but literacy really for us starts with the whole empower to thrive focus. We know that literacy is through and through a huge part of what we do in the classroom, whether it be a kindergarten classroom or a high school classroom. And we also know that the data shows that if students aren't able to read on grade level by third
Hmm.
grade, then it's a lot harder to continue to learn past third grade. And that
Hmm.
doesn't start in third grade. And so a lot of things we do in the classrooms are with public literacy in pre-K. And how do we make sure pre-K students are being more literate in writing, those kind of things there, as well as even our daycares in our community. We found that it's really important to push literacy in the community. We have a literacy bus, and so we have a full library on wheels. It's huge.
Tell me about the literacy bus.
So we have a full school bus that's been converted into a library on wheels. It has all the seating for students to come in and read books. There's shelving there. There's interactive stations on the library. On the bus. Uh, the bus can go through and be in certain neighborhoods. There's sometimes certain vendors or certain places in the community say, "Hey, can you bring the bus to our location, like pizza place, or to a birthday party, or to the community event center?" And the bus and show up there, and there are books there, and what's on the bus goes to students. They keep it, and so those books become part of those students' homes. And so our literacy bus has been a huge success for us, and we partnered with a local company, Lyondale Basel, and they help do everything we need. Wrap the bus; it's all pretty and colorful, and uh, it's a great piece for our community because, again, empower to thrive means having the skill sets to do that. And literacy is one of those skill sets. And so literacy has been a huge part of what we do in the classroom, but also in the community.
I love this. What a fun idea.
Yeah.
A library on wheels, and that's amazing. I like this. This is a new one. Um, okay, let me ask you about this. How do you balance you mentioned an instructional framework. How do you balance district-wide guardrails, such as like a coherent instructional framework, clear guidance around curriculum, assessments, and instructional practices? How do you balance that with campus autonomy
Mhm.
to innovate?
Yeah. So one of the things that came to my plate when I first came into this position, even as a assistant superintendent, was tiering the campuses and understanding that work there. And so one thing that we've always done here at Channelview the past few years, at least, has been to really focus in on what campuses need based on their data. And that's
Mhm.
not just academic growth data. That's looking at, okay, do I have a seasoned principal? Do I have teachers that are top-notch teachers in every area? Do I have a seasoned admin team like APs and office staff? And so looking at what their needs are and then doing our autonomy based on the needs of the campus. And so
Okay.
the truth be told is that when you are successful and you're getting good results, you have more autonomy as a campus. If your campus data shows that you need more support, then you may have less autonomy and more structures put in place for your campus. And so the balance comes about those academic results and saying that,
Mhm.
hey, this campus has the results it needs. So yeah, they have more autonomy because they're getting what they need done. So and it goes from the campus side all the way into the classroom side for teachers. Is that when teachers are showing that they have the results and they're doing what needs to be done in the classroom and the kids are growing and learning, and that teacher has more autonomy to do the job in the classrooms.
A few points that you made remind me of your, recent accomplishment in earning your doctorate and your dissertation. Will you share a little bit about, your dissertation and what you learned through that with our watchers today?
Awesome. So my dissertation title was "The Impact of Culturally Responsive School Leadership on Collective Teacher Efficacy in High Poverty Schools." And so I did all the research right here in Channelview ISD. I use a lot of Hattie's work tied to collective teacher efficacy. I use research on how we understand the cultures of our communities, the cultures of our campuses, and to realize that principals and leaders who have a high understanding of the culture of their campuses,
Mhm.
culture of the communities, and they embrace and address those areas, they also have a high level of collective teacher efficacy, which means that we know it results in higher student achievement. And so what I've recognized that the more my principals can really tone in on knowing what their campuses need and addressing those needs of their campuses in terms of a culture of achievement, a culture of acceptance, then the teachers in the classrooms feel more comfortable to reach all kids in the same way. And so I saw great results in the data. And a lot of research that I looked at was tied to, big cities and urban research, but I want to
Uh-huh.
see how it looks like really in, not a huge district, but a nice sized district, but somewhere where we can do the change right here or there. So I was able to work with principals individually and work on their culture on the campuses and work with them on what they saw as important on their campuses. And they were so attuned to what their community needed. And so I saw that, hey, you know what? This is why you're getting achievement in your campus. This is why we see results in your campus, because you know what the campus needs.
Mhm. Yes, and I'm a huge fan of Hattie's work. So sticking with that topic of collective teacher efficacy and the impact that it can have when it's really strong. Um, how do you or how does Channelview ISD, how do your school sites structure professional learning communities or grade level team meetings, whatever you may call them? How do you do that in a way um, that really drives results for kids and not just compliance?
So the big thing is time, is providing very clear time for this to happen, and then the structures for it. And so on the elementary level, we don't always have, I guess, some of the outside things that happen secondary. So at the elementary level, the time a lot of times is much more dedicated and very clear. But just the time by itself won't make it happen. It's about having very clear expectations and norms for that PLC time. My campuses that really have great PLCs, they realize that um, you don't go to PLC, you don't do PLC, you
Mhm.
are a PLC. And so in those situations there, they come into PLC time knowing that, hey, we have our lesson plans and scope and sequence work already done. We're coming in to discuss data. We're coming in to plan out assessments. We're coming in to have at bats. And so that time is really used to do the work, not to plan the work. And so I think that's the change that I've seen when I see really successful PLCs, is that you go to PLC and you have PLC time, but reality is you are a PLC and you do the
Mhm.
work during the PLC time you have, and not just plan things and do lesson plans. That's not a PLC.
Right. Yeah. And um, I think that sometimes what I see with teams of teachers is that um, they get caught up in the 4 questions, which are solid, but they might not talk enough about the strategies that led to the results they were getting in order to learn from each other's techniques.
Right.
So, sometimes I like to throw in this extra question just to have them, really develop that collective expertise that leads to that collective efficacy around why is it that these students are getting these results and these students are getting these results. And um, but so sometimes I see teams get caught up in data, and not as much. They might answer the question
Correct.
of what will we do, and if they don't, what will we do if they did? But they sometimes miss the how are we going to do it,
Yes. Yes.
and so then it becomes okay, go next meeting. Then we go right back to the looking at the data, and there sometimes miss a connection. And then the other thing I've seen is what you were speaking to, where it's like big picture planning department meeting or grade level meeting, and there's no data at all driving the discussion.
Yeah. What I've noticed, and something that I failed at as a principal, I think, was that I was really big on answering the questions, having the curriculum very tight, and know what we're doing curriculum wise. But the at bat part, that was a piece that I know
Mm,
as a leader myself, as on campuses and as department chair, I didn't really do the at bat piece. I didn't discuss how I was teaching something and practice teaching it, making sure everybody understood those things, and clarifying how I was going to use resource I was going to use in classes, and what questions I thought kids may have, answers, and those kind of things there.
Yeah.
But so when I see teams doing that, really practicing on each other, modeling a lesson in a PLC time, I love that, because that means they're internalizing it and recognizing, okay, this one thing here may need to be tweaked because the kids will probably think this when you say that. Make sure you give time for this because this is going to be longer than you think it's going to be. Or the activity you think you're going to be real cool about is going to fall flat. That's
Yeah.
kids don't like that. You think they do, but they don't like that. I mean, those kind of things there, it allows you to be really clear authenticity about how we're teaching this lesson, as well as what we can expect from kids learning from that lesson.
Yeah, and I appreciate your reflection and vulnerability and sharing like something you think, sometimes you looking back could have done better. I
Oh,
think that's so huge. I mean, I have those moments all the time as well, and yeah, I'm in assuming the role of a secondary literacy coach, and working with a very large junior high in Southern California at the time. We had 1,400 kids at the school,
wow.
and so our ELA, ELD, reading intervention, PLC time group. We'd split out into these light content area teams to, and as the coach, I would really emphasize the clarity piece, the standards and the objectives, as they're going through the questions, the alignment of the assessment, the common assessment to that piece, and yeah, but I think you're right. There's more to it than that. And
Right.
looking back, that's definitely an area that I know I could have helped our team, and our team as a whole could have improved in our collaborative time together. Um, Dr. Houston, I'm also thinking about connecting back to Hattie's research. One of the pieces that I find fascinating, that came out of meta-analysis that he's done, is that in general, doesn't matter the demographic, the state, the nation, even the location, the resources, the lack of like in general, within a school district system or within a system, an educational system as a whole, the variance that exists inside a single school building from classroom to classroom is actually even greater
Yeah.
than the variance that exists between school sites. However, both are pretty large. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking like 35, 37%, 65, 67%. Don't quote me on the exact percentage, but it's big. And so when you like have some of these grade level teams or department teams that are really strong, that could be resulting in much better outcomes for kids than others within the building.
Mhm.
How do you develop that collective advocacy across school site or like across the whole school site and from school site to school site?
Yeah, that's a huge piece there. My superintendent and I had a long talk about this just this week, and so
Really? Okay.
the phrase that's been coming up a lot has been minimize variation, maximize time.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Okay,
because
good.
I think when you think about what goes on campus side, it's not fair for a teacher or for a student to be in a classroom, and because I'm in this classroom, my success is greater.
It's
That's
not
not
fair.
fair for it's not fair at all. And so how do we as school leaders, and district leaders reduce that variation so that basically if I go to a school, I know that in any classroom I go into, I've got a great chance of success. And so I think the key to that is really being very clear on what you expect. Um, Finding out what works in our school. What are the
Mhm.
best practices? And I think the phrase best practices has to be changed to say next practices, because the best practices were based off of what was best for so many times before and
Uh-huh.
was
Oh,
over the
yeah.
past. But let's say next practices. What are those innovative skills and things that we need to do in our classroom that we know work? And how to make sure that we give the time to share those with all teachers to make sure that we all understand what that is. We learn from each other to then say, now let's see in other classrooms. Now let's watch that. Let's observe that. And let's check to make sure it's happening. I think for me, there's five main questions I always ask for us to say, are we really doing what we need to do? The first thing is, do we have a very clear curriculum, instruction, and assessment strategy? That's very, very clear. The second thing is, are we putting data in the hands of students, teachers, administrators make good decisions. The next thing is there time dedicated for collaboration and review of the data to ensure we're doing the right things to adjust our instruction? The next thing is learning. Do we provide learning for all those who need learning? Teachers, the students, support structures. Is learning happening? And the last thing comes down to accountability. Are we holding each other accountable? If we're doing all those things there, but not holding each other accountable, that's when you have the variation. And so oftentimes that accountability isn't happening. And so even though we did all those four things and it's looking great in some places, it's only in those pockets because we're not holding everybody accountable to reaching that standard in every classroom.
Mhm. That like there were moments where I was having feelings like, oh, let me like all sentimental, but you know, I'm a fan of Brene Brown's, and she, in Atlas of the Heart, really talked about how the word feelings. I hope I'm getting the right book. I may have been another one of her works, but it's really like what you feel in your body, like you feel them. And I had these emotional feelings when you were talking about what the conversation that you and Dr. Hill had, because that's what I'm passionate about. And, I my husband and I, we don't have children. That just isn't what God had in play, and plan. It wasn't his plan for us. But at the same time, I was born like to be a mom. And so when I'm, working with schools or districts and teachers, that comes out in me where I think about like, if I were a parent of human, now I do have we have fur babies, but if I were the parent of a human being that was going to school, I'm afraid I would be that person, that parent you didn't want, who is there demanding certain teachers
Yes.
because of what I've learned and what I see out
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And it truly is the challenge, I think, is like, how do we've got to have the time, the structures. We have to have processes and, protocols, and we have to have a team. So, there's that has to happen before you can even really get to the real work. All those things to try to reduce this variance, because it is not fair and it is not okay.
It's not.
It's really not. And it also shouldn't matter if you're in this school or that school.
Yes.
You should have every child deserves all the opportunities. Like, they deserve to have choices for exciting futures. And so I'm super passionate about that. And yeah, I think that what was the phrase you used? There was something that you said.
Minimize variation, maximize time.
Yeah. Okay, that other piece that hit me too, because in uh and you're right about next practices. I'm not going to argue with that, because we've got to keep innovating. But in the tried and true, that's over and over, it shows up for years now. We've known
Yes.
that time is essential, and it has a direct correlation and causation for outcomes for kids. And so, when you think about, like, we have a certain amount of time that we are just given
That's it.
as a teacher.
Yeah.
And that, that lies within the calendar,
That's right.
that lies within the bell schedule, within the amount of time allotted to each content area or class period. And while we might be able to vote or show up or to express an idea, we can't really impact that so much. So, like, if you take that as like, this is what I'm given, this is what is,
That's all we
uh,
got.
that's it. Within that amount of time, every single teacher, every single team of teachers, every single department, every school has somewhere within that is going to lie, within that available time, the amount of allocated time. In other words, like, I'm going to try to maximize that time that I allocate to actual instruction, whether that's teaching social emotional learning skills or, academic skills, um, you know, technical skills in, technical education. Regardless of whatever that content is that I'm teaching, I can try, and I need to try to be really good at maximizing that allocated time. But there's still going to be some things. There'll be some interruptions and some, distractions or things that I can't fully control. But do I take 5 minutes to take attendance, Or do I know I have 20 in the class and I count the seats and I know who sits where because I know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I take 10 seconds. Uh, so it's like, and then within that, there lies what's called like the engagement rate. And here again, I want that maximized, but no matter how hard I try, the engagement rate or the amount of time the kids are spending speaking, listening, reading, writing, thinking about their learning in that content area, um, I can't fully control because a kid might be coming with something really heavy from home on their mind and they may be distracted. And, there could be something happening in the classroom, a dynamic between students,
Right.
all those things, right? And humans, like our minds wander. That's normal. But I can absolutely get to be a very, very strong practitioner with strategies and tools that do that.
Right.
And somewhere within that amount of time lies that success rate. Because even when kids are actively engaged with the content and, I have maximized the amount of time that they're doing that within the available time I've got, there are going to be some kids that are struggling. So the only way to really take that success rate and push it out is to start maximizing time. So I love that conversation that you all are having.
It's huge. It's huge for us. So we were doing some observations in classrooms, and one thing that's come up out of that conversation we had, and it's been all this week, and literally we talked this morning again about it, is that sense of urgency. Is that
Mhm.
feel it. You can feel when a teacher has that urgency in the classroom. It's like my kids have to learn this. I've got to make sure they learn this. You can just feel it, and so it's like, how do you maximize not just the time, but also that sense of urgency? Because sometimes you can be on a whole campus. You can go to a campus and it's in a hallway. You can tell it, and that campus learning is important. That's a priority. That it is about learning. In other campuses, you feel like, hey, it's a little looser, and you feel that, hey, you know what? We learn, but right now we're having some good time. It's a downtime day. You just hear it in the hallways. You can tell the difference of a sense of urgency for students learning and growth versus, well, we're getting there. And so the idea is that how do we maximize that too? That sense that, hey, I've got to do this. I've got to be in the power
Yeah.
zone. I've got to make sure that I'm in the game with my kids every single day. And so I think that's a piece that is up to school leaders and district leaders to figure out how do you do that, because I can't blame a teacher for their lack of urgency if I'm not providing
Right.
them the tools and maybe the pressure sometimes to be more urgent.
You know what else I think? Man, I'm loving this conversation. You know what else I think? I think there's a real, not necessarily in Channelview ISD. I haven't visited your schools or classrooms, but in general, there's too many places where expectations for kids who are socioeconomically, not social emotion, socioeconomically disadvantaged, or students of minority students, or English language learners, or students with special needs are just so low.
Oh,
And
oh,
the expectation, it's ooh, it just gets me. The expectations are a big thing. Like, when and so yeah, we're having fun because this is what they can do. And
uh,
when I hear that, when I see that,
yeah,
it's just it's like, oh no, we cannot. That is not the job. That is not the calling, um,
no.
for
If you want
us.
to get me upset, you tell me things like our kids can't do that, or that's too much for my kids, or
Mhm.
that's too hard for the kids. That upsets me to my core, because I was one of
Yes.
those kids. And if someone had long time ago said, you know what, Michael, his dad died when he was 10, and they're poor, and so what,
Yeah.
easy on him. He don't be so hard. Just have fun today.
Yeah.
Just make it a game day. Then where would I be right now? And so, how do we make sure that for all kids, we raise that bar and we provide scaffolds to get to that bar?
Right.
Because yes, there are things that students may need differently because of their certain needs. Doesn't mean they can't do it. They just need some scaffolds. At
Yes.
Channelview ISD, we're about 90% eco-dis. We are 40% of our students are emerging bilingual students. And so we know there's a need that our students have. But we will not lower expectations to say, well, our kids can't do that. Our goal is to
Yeah.
make sure growth is a priority. Every single child must grow. That's not an option. That's not what some kids will grow. They will all grow. And we'll continue to grow till student achievement gets higher and higher and higher, but they will grow every year in Channelview.
And that's what it needs to be. And I love hearing you say that. And I love every single kid, because on the other end of the spectrum, what we have out there are the kids that aren't being served because they already are doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just kind of going along, getting, just they're
Yeah,
going through the motions. They're
they're
great
bored.
kids,
They're
but
bored.
they're bored.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does lead to, misbehaviors as well. But other times, they're just going through the motions. And, I was watching a show. This is like totally unrelated, but because of, my background as an educator and really learning about what works best across systems for long term gains and improvement, I couldn't help but think, make a connection. But on the show, and I can't remember which show, I have to say I'm guilty of like flipping around. But there was a daughter doing homework, and she had music playing, and she was, like maybe the TV was on in the background, and she was just rocking and rolling. And I think it was math. And a dad like, how can you do this? And she was just like, it's easy. And it was, the work was like basic procedural, operational mathematics, uh, single or double step problems. And she looked like she was in junior high. And so it's like, okay, well, like maybe it is too. Now, some kids do better, some adults do better with music or with other, things. But anyway, it just made me think of that. And yeah, sorry, I kind of wandered there a bit, but yeah, it was. So we could talk about this all day, but I guess we could go ahead and wrap up if that's okay with you. Unless there's anything else that you're thinking you really want to say about the amazing work that you all are doing in Channelview ISD.
I do want to say something because you mentioned about sometimes that viewpoint because of eco justice and because of certain things of districts.
Mhm.
This past year in Channelview, we were able to raise the bar on growth for our district across the board. And so we went from a C to a B. We had campuses that had 10 plus points in growth in their accountability
Wow.
rating because we had a really clear focus on every single child must grow. And so I think that's so important to me. I think that's something that for me is very internalized as far as what I want to see in education. I think every single child in a school district in our country deserves a world class education, and when we don't do that, we're failing kids. And so I think it's very important to understand that being high eco dis, having a high percentage of EB students does not mean that we lower the bar for our kids. It just means we've got to do more for our kids. And so we're going to do that. And I think that's what has to be in every school district, whether you are high eco dis or low eco dis.
Mhm.
You got to make sure that you're doing more for your kids to need more. And that's just what has to happen. It's not an optional thing. It's not a thing that we say, well, if we have funds for it, we'll do it. It's bigger than the state. It's bigger than accountability. It's about really having a mission and drive to know that if we're doing education the way it's supposed to be done for all children, this
Mhm.
is what we do. And so I think that's very important. You mentioned that. I think that's very important to understand that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations on that growth that you all experienced. Um, I think I'd like to just say, someone you're in a pretty big area. There's a lot of different districts nearby and not too far away. There could be some seasoned teachers looking for a new home, or some new teachers looking like, hey, where can I start my career? And maybe some principals, administrators, and others that you might have a need for. Where could they go to learn more about your district and any openings that you may have?
Right. Well, Channelview ISD can be found online at cvisd.org. That's letter C, visd.org. You go to our website. We have a great communications department that goes through and updates things daily. Go see our great things going on. We have a whole kind of series on that circle for our staff here who come from being students here. And so it's great to see some of our students who were once students who are now staff members. I'll share one story that's really clear. We have a student here who graduated from Channelview ISD, came back as a bus driver, then a teacher, and is now an AP at one of our
I
junior
love
highs.
that.
So that kind of story there is about Channelview. That's how we function. A lot of our staff, a lot of our families have been here for a while, and so we love bringing those people back. And so it's a great place to be. I love being here in Channelview.
Thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, I'm, full transparency. I did give Dr. Houston a heads up about this before we started filming the show today. But trying to think of some way to kind of end the podcast on a lighter note, something a little bit more fun and personal. I thought, you know what, let's practice gratitude. So that's what we're going to try for now. So Dr. Michael Houston, Deputy Superintendent of Channelview ISD, I would like to thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm grateful for having you and glad we could make our schedules work because I think that you offered some valuable insight to others that may watch and good ideas for others to possibly take away and apply. And I'd like to ask you the same question. What are you grateful for? It could be about this, or it doesn't have to be at all. It could be about personal life. Yeah, what are you grateful for and why?
I think about being grateful in this moment right now. It's the opportunity that I have to do what I do, and so I give a lot of gratitude, appreciation to Dr. Tori Hill, who's my superintendent, my boss, my friend, my mentor, and so for the opportunity to do this work. Um, I came to Channelview from being on the campus in a much different environment, a much different district, and so he took a chance on me coming in here and really has had a lot of faith in the work that I can do. And so I want to say I'm thankful for Dr. Hill for really saying, "Hey, Michael, I believe in you," and then let me kind of say, "Do the work." And so he has lots of times said, "Hey, I trust you. Go do the work."
That's wonderful. We'll end it on that. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Unlock 360 podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and visit leadteachlearn360.com to learn more about us because every school deserves systems that work and leaders who can make them thrive.